For each of these functions, we would like to determine if they are linear. Linear means that if we were to plot these points and connect them, it would create a straight line. But rather than plotting a bunch of points, what we can do is see if the x's change by the same amount, then the y's should also change by the same amount. Let's start with function 1. Do the x's change by the same amount? To get from -3 to -1, we would need to add 2. And from -1 to +1, we would also add 2. And finally, from 1 to 3, we would add 2. Since the x's change by the same amount, let's investigate the y's. To get from -3 to -4, subtract 1. From -4 to -5, subtract 1. And to get from -5 to -6, we would need to subtract 1. Since the change in y's is the same, this means this function is linear. Let's investigate function 2, starting with, do the x's change by the same amount? To get from 4 to 5, we would add 1. From 5 to 6, add 1. And from 6 to 7, add 1. Since the x's changed by the same amount, let's see if the y's changed by the same amount. To get from 2 to 4, we would add 2. To get from 4 to 8, we would add 4. And to get from 8 to 16, we would add 8. The change in the y's is not the same. Therefore, this function is not linear. Let's now look at a couple functions in table form. Let's still take a look first if the x's change by the same amount. To get from 3 to 5, I would need to add 2. To get from 5 to 7, I would need to add 2. And to get from 7 to 9, I would add 2. So do the y's change by the same amount? To get from 1 to 2, I would need to add 1. To get from 1 to 3, I would add 1. But to get from 3 to 2, I would need to subtract 1. So the change in y's are not the same. Therefore, function 3 is not linear. Last example is function 4. If the change in x's are the same, then the change in y's need to be the same. So to move from one x to the next, I would need to add 4. Now to get from -1 to -6, I would need to subtract 5. And to get from -6 to -13, I would need to subtract 7. Ultimately, we can see that the change is not the same before we even get to the subtract 6. So function 4 is not linear.